October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This is an issue that can affect anyone in any walk of life at any time. But when it comes to how it impacts different types of people, not everyone is treated the same. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence says about a third of women and men in New York State will experience domestic violence at some point in their lives. But tonight, we're taking an in-depth look at this issue through a new lens, focusing on one aspect of violence that no one ever talks about.
Mimi, or our uncles will call her Bubbles, or China Doll.
Brown baby.
Brown baby.
Jamaica Price was a true Buffalonian. She went for everything and she stopped at nothing to get it. Price met her husband at 18 and married young, eventually having 2 daughters together. But her sisters say they knew from the beginning something wasn't right.
I think he'll do something to you. Like, I really honestly feel deep down inside that he's going to do something to you, that he's going to harm you. And she would tell me, oh, he might be crazy, but he's not that crazy.
Price worked as a real estate agent, and when she decided on law school, she moved with her husband and kids to Atlanta. Out of sight of her family, the details of what went on in her home were mostly obscured.
She said the things that you think you know, she said you don't know. She said it's 10 times worse. I would never, ever, ever, ever forget that.
Price's husband killed her 4 years ago this November. Looking back, sisters Janice and Chantry say they consider what more could have been done.
One of the hardest things is getting family and friends to realize that, because they want to just pick you up and snatch you out. And so teaching family and friends, how do you support your loved one when they're in the midst of this until they get to the point where they make that decision for themselves that it's time to go.
Dr. Noelle Saintville is a researcher of intimate partner violence at the University at Buffalo. After years of talking with women in these relationships, she's found the system as it's set up was never intended to serve victims like Jamaica Price.
Black women are more likely than any other group to fight back, and which is part of the reason why a lot of black women say, what do you mean I'm a victim of intimate partner violence? Like, I'm giving it just as good as I get it. There's no victim here, and so I don't qualify. Dr.
Saintville says black women have uniquely complicated circumstances that surround violence in the home.
There's the experience of violence, which, you know, might be the same or different across race, but the overall, how you perceive your violence, how you respond to violence, the types of services you receive, how systems treat you in the midst of violence is completely different when it comes to white women and black women.
4 out of every 10 black women will be hurt by their partner in their lifetime. And statistics show black women are more likely to be killed at the hands of their abusers. The problem is their response or defense can put them and their families in even more danger.
The minute you're fighting back, you put yourself at risk for, now when the police show up on the scene, now I'm going to have to do a dual arrest. Oh, they both got some sort of marks or bruises. Now I have to take the kids in. And so black women who are victims of intimate partner violence are more likely to have their kids taken into the system because of the form of self-defense that's used.
We're told many black women shy away from formal DV services because they fear child protective services getting involved. And when it comes to intimate partner violence to the families and to the court, family separation is typically not the answer.
I want to take the kids away from their father.
It's not that we want our significant others arrested. That's not the solution.
Buffalo Family Court Judge Lenora Footbeavers sees a domestic violence case in her court every day. 2,400 new DV filings were made in her jurisdiction last year alone. She says this isn't what many people want to hear, but the facts are, when considering her ruling on these cases, it's about getting to the root of the violence and not punishing people for their circumstance.
It's really not going to help our communities and our neighborhoods, sending people to jail. We want to be able to get people to be productive members of our communities, and we also don't want to break up families.
You can't just look at it's a man hitting a woman. You have to look at some of those other factors that come into play.
Dr. Saintville's research has shown those stress-inducing factors play a big role in intimate partner violence.
It's never just intimate partner violence.
Factors like unemployment, lack of transportation, poverty, and racism, particularly in communities of color, lead to higher rates of abuse. Saintville says this is the exact reason the solution to violence can't come from the system, because to many, the system has already failed the Black community.
Yes, we want to make sure that people are appropriately dealt with when they commit a crime, but we also want to make sure that people receive the resources and the services that they need in order to be better.
Messages all along the way that these services were never created with me in mind.
So the solution, she says, must come from the community itself.
If we can help you with unemployment, we're eventually going to get to intimate partner violence. If we can help you with education, mental health, substance use, how can we ignore substance use but then focus on how do we change intimate partner violence if your mind's not even in the right place?
Even when you identify a mental health trigger, overcoming the hurdles in place in the Black community can still stand in the way. In Price's case, a lack of trust in the system put a barrier between her husband and what he needed to keep his family together.
And he had to seek the court-ordered mental health treatment that he refused. He refused that.
He's like, yeah, no white man gonna tell me what to do.
Then when it comes to resources in place, Saintville's research shows all signs quite literally point to Black women having no place.
If I see a domestic violence poster, who's on it? It's a white woman. It's not somebody that looks like me. Also, if I see the poster, I see the demeanor of the person in the poster. It's somebody, black guy, curled up, not fighting back, meek, and so none of that fits the experiences that I'm going through.
I do blame the court system. I blame the police. Because you did nothing.
Price, still in Atlanta, had separated from her husband in 2016. She was living with their children a county away, working toward a divorce. A court hearing for permission to take her children to Buffalo for the Thanksgiving holiday would seal her fate.
I fear that he can get me here quicker than what he can do. He'll think twice about trying to come to my family to get me. Those were her words to the court. Those were her last words to the court.
Her husband blocked her trip in court, then lured her to his home alone 2 days before Thanksgiving. She would never make it back to their children.
When she was found, she still had on her coat. She still had on her purse.
Price was strangled and found by a cousin after her sisters say police dragged their feet on executing a proper search. They told the family it was an issue of jurisdiction.
Then he called me back and he said they found her.
And that's when she called me.
Thanksgiving Day.
Price's killer had enough time to take 4 flights to a country without extradition. He even wrote a note so disturbing, authorities would only paraphrase its contents to her family.
To sum it up and to quote out of the letter, for my kid's life, I take your life.
Judge Foot Beavers, who handles dozens of these cases each week, says there's one thing she thinks about long after a family has left her courtroom.
They don't realize the impact violence has on children.
She's thinking, well, I don't know, but he killed my mom and did these bad things. Like, well, should I be missing him? I'm like, you have feelings. It's okay to feel what you feel.
That is your father at the end of the day.
I was like, that's your dad. I was like, it's okay to feel whatever you feel.
Months later, authorities located Price's husband in a room in Vietnam. He was dead. Price's sisters say the violence that took place within the 4 walls of that family's home didn't die when 2 children became orphans.
So they really didn't get it at that moment. They just knew, okay, my mom is dead. Okay, now my father killed my mom. Oh, wow. Now my dad killed himself. Really, oh wow. Now it's, wait, I don't have any parents.
This isn't one of those stories that ends with a phone number to call or a solution or some advice. This is a story that ends with people on every side of a situation saying society has failed an entire community by trying to solve a problem through an exclusively white lens, through villainization and not restoration, jail and not therapy, through poverty and not position.
Nightmares.
It's a lot of trauma.
A lot of trauma.
There's an emotional trauma that children are suffering. And so putting someone in jail is not going to necessarily solve that problem because that parent is still absent.
And if we got to pick, one thing, the most important service needed for our communities, mental health is it.
This is a story that ends with Black women left out of the equation and being forced to manage the consequences again. That is such an important story to tell. And I want to thank all of the women who were brave enough to share their stories and to share that perspective. This is one of those situations where I can't separate who I am from what I do. As a woman, as a Black woman, as someone whose family has experienced some of these issues, I've never seen a story told like this that understands where we're coming from, that understands all those factors that come into play. And it was just a really validating experience to be able to tell that story, and I'm so grateful. I lied though when I said that this isn't one of those stories that ends with a phone number, because I do want to leave you with a number if you need it. Harvest House Ministries has been working with the Family Justice Center because they realize some of these factors that come into play, and they realize some of the barriers to getting Black women the help that they need. So they have a drop-in center. It's at 175 Jefferson. This is in a neighborhood that has a large number of Black women. There's an advocate there that looks like you, a person of color. If you want to go, they can understand, or they're trying to understand what you need and how to get you that help. The number is 855-0654. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back.